Good evening. My name is Subhadra Banda, and I'm very tempted to speak in Tamil, but I'm going to try not to. So, I'm a second-year student at the Harvard Kennedy School and a co-chair of the India Conference. It is my pleasure, my great pleasure, to introduce the last keynote of the day, titled Freedom of Speech. Freedom of speech is widely considered the bedrock of democracy. However, in his keynote, reputed actor, director, and writer, Dr. Kamal Haasan, and I'm going to wait, discusses the tenuous relationship between the freedom of speech and democracy. Dr. Haasan questions whether democracy is the only hope for free speech. This keynote session will be moderated by Sushma Raman. Sushma Raman is the executive director of the Carr Center of Human Rights here at the Kennedy School, where she's also an adjunct lecturer in public policy and also an alumni. She's done extensive work in the areas of human rights, social justice, and philanthropy at the Ford Foundation and the Open Society Foundation. Well, having grown up in a household that watched and rewatched Nayagan and Devar Magan, I take great pleasure in introducing one of the most prominent names in Indian cinema, Dr. Kamal Haasan. Dr. Haasan received the I was like, okay, should I wait again? Received the President's Medal for his first role at the age of 4 when he started his career in cinema. From that moment, a remarkable career spanning more than 50 years and more than 200 films in 6 different languages, winning 4 national awards. Dr. Haasan received in 1990 the Padma Shri and in 2014 the Padma Bhushan for his contributions to Indian cinema. In his effort to further the technology adaptation by the Indian film industry, he has headed the FICCI Media and Entertainment Business Conclave in the capacity of chairman since 2009. Most recently, Mr. Haasan has been an advocate for children affected by HIV. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kamal Haasan.
How do I address it? How do I address it? Check. It works. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it truly, truly is a pleasure. I'm happy to be here. I wanted to be here. And here I am. Without deserving it like you guys, I'm here as a guest, but still I'm happy. So I'm going to read my speech off my phone in case I get a phone call. I don't know what I'm going to do. Okay. So here's the topic, freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is unlike love. Love, as popularly quoted, is never having to say that you're sorry. With freedom of speech, you must be ready to say as many things as you want, need to, before you say sorry. That too only when you're truly convinced you are. Sorry, that is. The choice of the topic freedom of speech was mine. Those who invited me here must have also believed in it, for they allowed me this freedom of choosing the topic. Why did I choose this topic? Why now? Is it because as a filmmaker, free thinker, free speaker, do I feel that my work might be impeded by this lack of freedom of speech? Yes, I got the phone call. So my speech disappeared. I beg your pardon? Is it because as a filmmaker, a free speaker and thinker, I feel suddenly concerned about my freedom of speech? Is it any reason untoward or frightening attempt to curb or coerce my speech? Through politics or religion, or both? My honest answer, not really. To be precise, not exactly. I'm only voicing my concern, which is handed down to me by my ancestors, generations of town criers who care for their lot. What is Kamal Haasan's problem? What is ailing him? That he chooses to speak on freedom of speech as if it were threatened. That too in a democratic fortress like the US of A, where freedom thrives, and freedom of speech more so. You can speak, rap, curse, and also use parliamentary language to show off your education. That's the kind of freedom enjoyed here. But is that freedom of speech? Is that freedom enough? Hyde Park in London centuries ago allowed somewhat similar freedom. It was called soapbox oratory and allowed speaking opportunity. For centuries, many could clearly see the oppressing or the opportunistic political hand throughout history, however stealthily it moved. From the Senate of Rome to the modern-day Senates. Democracy is often touted as being the only bastion for freedom of speech. My opinion is questioned when I tell them democracy is not the most infallible of political systems. They take umbrage, they see red as my political complexion. Let me confess I'm not. I feed myself in this international buffet of political ideologies, never committed to one diet as if it were my religion. I think, like in his food habits, man should remain omnivorous to stay on top of the food chain. I don't have a religion, yet I shamelessly use some of the rare but finer points from even religion for a better living and harmony. I don't think that either democracy, communism, or fascism, or any other cocktail of isms is going to be the ultimate and final answer for all social maladies. We have in our short 10,000-year period of time experimented with various combinations. It is work in progress. Our society is work in progress. Some scientists believe that human mind itself is work in progress. So I'm unwilling to accept any one political ideology as a settled cure for all our woes. I'm always usually sternly informed that I cannot deny the fact that only in a democracy can freedom of speech exist. Freedom, unlike money, sir, is not safe once inside a bank locker. It won't safely accrue to be withdrawn for use in times of dire need. Constant vigil is necessary to safeguard it. I am part of that large vigilant community that is always on the lookout for subtle political coercion. That's the reason why I'm willingly part of the reform committee in India that is going to recommend a new order of function for the Film Certification Board. A board that surreptitiously tries to censor films and other voices in the name of culture and the state. I'm not here to bash democracy or praise communism or socialism. I've taken this opportunity to put on record through media and those receptive minds here that we cannot take freedom of speech for granted and complacently think that democracy automatically means freedom of speech. It is only through the offices of democracy that Adolf Hitler rose to power. Oh, that was when the world was naive. Not anymore possible, some say. Let's move forward in history, and that too in Indian political history, and you find emergency promulgated and voices silenced in plain sight for the world to see. I'm not taking a dig at my own country. As a matter of fact, I'm proud of the kind of democracy we have managed to practice in spite of the many attempts to abuse it. India is a younger democracy as compared to the century-old democracy practiced in UK and the US of A. Yet, universal suffrage, that is voting rights for citizens of India, came into practice 15 years before it came into practice in the democracy called America. It was not democracy that allowed freedom of speech and freedom itself, but the other way around. It was freedom of speech that sculpted and cultured democracy. Silenced voices rose in harmony, masterfully orchestrated by Martin Luther King. His blood was the ink that made corrections in the law of this land. America moved into a period of transition after that. Not only India, the world is in transition. The world is going to face new challenges, find new opportunities. I can almost hope to see borders blur within my lifetime, and all will truly and slowly become citizens of the world instead of boasting limited parochial borders. Many, many whistles will have to be blown before that happens. I'm proud and fortunate to be in a medium that can reflect and protect freedom of speech, and even fight for it subcutaneously, and also in a full frontal attack if need be. Some of my friends asked, "You're going to speak all this in Harvard?" Some of them asked in awe and some in disbelief. I have been constantly reminded before coming here about my lack of intramural training. I must humbly submit that I'm a high school dropout. Before, with very little success on my side, I used to brag about being a dropout and yet managing to move seamlessly in a scholarly circles without being caught out. That's because I was a good actor. I knew my lines. I have over time realized the value of education and the institutions that disperse it. It might be true that even these great institutions need to be constantly reformed. I can only agree with pedestrian understanding that change is permanent and rigidity or stagnation is the recipe for atrophy and regression. I've always envied people like you who have pursued wisdom and skill in your chosen field where it is taught with scientific methodology. People often confuse my voicing dreams of going back to film school as humility, that too false humility. Believe me, it's truly humility that time and experience has taught me, that too not very kindly. I have learned little tricks in the time I spent in the film industry, a little more than half a century. What took me nearly 25 years to learn could easily be taught to me in a proper film school in 5 or 7 years. The only difference and a happy compensation was that I was earning through the process of learning instead of spending on my education. I guess that's a good trade-off. While India is poised for a leap in many fields, in my own field of activity, we are preparing the ground for India to become truly an international contestant in the global market. We want India not to become complacent with a happy captive home market of 1.2 billion. We want India to set world standards. We have done it before. We have been the forerunners and actual practitioners of the civil disobedience, an idea presented as a theory by Henry David Thoreau. We actually put it to practice. Thanks be to Mr. Rajagopalachari, popularly known as Rajaji, and our own Mr. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. India became a trendsetter for giants like Mr. Martin Luther King and Mr. Mandela to emulate. Those vigilant gentlemen have made it possible for me to speak fearlessly, but with responsibility today. I respect the way their freedom to speak was won. On a rare occasion, freedom of speech was won, taking on violence without returning it in kind. A very hard act to follow. To take on violence with non-violence needs extraordinary valor. Not without reason does Gandhiji, an otherwise humble man, openly brag about ahimsa being the highest form of valor. That's why probably the 24th Tirthankara, the saint in the Jainic religious order, the champion of ahimsa, was called Mahavira. the great warrior. Ahimsa is difficult to achieve. It is not done merely by turning vegetarian. Being a vegetarian and yet showing apathy to a fellow human being is purpose defeated. In my mind, there is this constant tussle between Darwin's theory and the fascinating concept of ahimsa. Well, that's another subject for another podium, another debate. Once again, I remind myself and you to be on constant vigil. Any government, institution, or religion trying overtly or covertly to coerce your mind to suit a narrow selfish purpose with disregard to larger society is something we should all be wary of. I, as an actor, found that dialogue always enhanced my performance. And soliloquy, if I'm not careful, made me look like a ham. They had given me 20 minutes. I don't know whether they've taken that much time, but in favor of dialogue, I relinquish whatever time is left over and would like to enhance my performance in a dialogue with you. Thank you.
Are we moving this? Thank you for your very thought-provoking remarks. We're going to have a conversation now, and then I'll open it up for questions and answers. Before we started, I actually looked up the definition of question. It's a sentence that seeks information through a reply. So it's not a statement. It's not a profession of your deep commitment to seeing all of his movies. It's really one sentence that ends in a question mark. And we're hoping that we'd have the opportunity to hear from many of you. I'm going to start with a conversation with some questions for you. I was particularly struck by your phrase, to speak fearlessly but with responsibility. And I was wondering whether you see this as a role that actors have as a responsibility to society, and is this a responsibility for the larger film industry as well?
Yes, responsibility even to the listener. You can't offend him just because I get a good line to speak. I think that's the first responsibility. It's not offending because you want to put forward an idea and get a laugh out of the larger majority and disregard a few people there. That's also my responsibility. It's from starting from there, it goes up to whatever topic I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. To be informed is the first responsibility.
So what do you see the role of actors, people who are in the public sphere, who can shape public opinion and who can advocate for freedom of speech?
Most artists say that I'm an artist, I don't care what's happening around me. Let me do my art, let politics do its business. And that's a dangerous position to take. Everybody should be in politics, not necessarily contesting for a seat in the parliament, but you should be. That's what I was talking about, the vigil. The common man has a responsibility. Satyagraha is not something you let Gandhiji do and walk behind and make him a Mahatma. Satyagraha is something you personally, individually get involved in.
So do you see freedom of speech as a duty and a right? Because increasingly people in human rights are talking not just about rights, but also about responsibilities. What responsibilities and duties do we have to each other?
Well, not only to each other, the whole world. I mean, I heard a speech where somebody was making fun of all the communists. Where have they gone? They've suddenly disappeared. Then they said, no, they've all turned green. They're talking about ecosystems now. They said we call them watermelon communists. They're green on the outside, cut the fruit and you see the red inside. So, I mean, there are various ways of looking at your responsibilities. There are people talking of human rights for gorillas. That's a broad spectrum of our responsibilities. And Well, we are talking human rights for gorillas, because they are the closest of the kin to us. You can have a blood transfusion with a gorilla and live to tell the story.
So you commented that democracy may not be necessarily the sole conduit for freedom of speech. Do you think that there are other forms of government that are more conducive, or is it our obligation to ensure that no matter what government exists, that we should each individually work on ensuring freedom of speech?
Absolutely. That's what the unknown man in Tiananmen Square was all about. That was freedom of speech. He said it without a word. He just stood in front of the tank. Mm-hmm. And that will happen. It will surface. It is genetically implanted. It will surface. So I'm not talking that. I'm not just simply saying that it could thrive elsewhere and not in democracy. It'll thrive anywhere. But you cannot believe that this taken care of takes care of the other thing. Mm-hmm. It's like a daily chore. You have to do that.
Now, something that's in the news quite a bit around the world is really growing income inequality. It's being talked about even in Davos, of course, in the elections here. Is income inequality a threat to democracy, and are there implications for individual freedoms with rising income inequality, which then may have implications for other kinds of access for people?
Come again? What was the last thing?
Income inequality. So does income inequality have implications for democracy and people's ability to participate in democracy?
That's happening in India now. Let me talk about, I'm not very well informed about American politics, not even Indian politics to be precise, but I'm closer to it. So let me say this sudden knee-jerk reaction to freedom of speech and sudden intolerance and sudden umbrage for anything that is said is very new, and I have seen great political leaders being questioned right in front of people. Gandhiji, 10 days before his death, was lampooned in front of people, and he took it all because they were complaining about how he ruined the country. And he took it all in with a deep breath, and he was doing the duty of an elder. And there were many such politicians, not only Gandhiji. Mm-hmm. But all that is something which is sorely missing mm-hmm. here today, anywhere today.
You had mentioned towards the end that India could really set sort of global standards, right? So do you see that possible even in the human rights arena and around issues of freedom of speech and democratic participation?
I wish I could say yes. I truly wish I could say yes, but that would be not the full truth, mm-hmm. maybe even a lie. It's very difficult. We're trying, and religion and politics is not helping in that front.
Say more.
Yeah, I know. I wish I could say more. I will, but they're only making the drift grow more, the drifting apart happen more. They sort of make it easy for wedges to be mm-hmm. put in place, that they can never ever come together. I think what Nehruji spoke of as unity in diversity is one thing we are trying to lose very fast, mm-hmm. as if it is on an agenda basis, and I don't like it. And once again, I reiterate, religion and politics has a very big hand in driving that wedge between logic, compassion, and unity and mm-hmm. diversity.
Wonderful. I'm going to clap. So I'm going to open it up to the audience. I'm not sure if we have mics or if you would like to just speak really loud, and I'll try and summarize your question. Yes, the gentleman right here. Oh, there are 4 mics. Sorry. Can you point them out? Can you just point them out?
phone.
Yeah. I'm sorry, there's 4 mics, so actually if folks could get to the mics just because it's being recorded. Yeah. So if you could get to the mic and get in line there, then that might be easier.
There, somebody's got a mic.
Good evening, sir. I'm Prashant Kannan. I'm a grad student from Johns Hopkins University. I have 2 questions for you. When Vishwarupam 1 released, you faced with a lot of controversies, and finally you had to censor or unmute few scenes. Vishwarupam 2 is also of same genre. If the same issue,
same story.
If the same issues prop up, how will you deal with it? And my second question, everyone wants to ask this question to you. Some of my friends even messaged me this morning. Do you have plans of restarting the shooting for Mardanayagam?
Okay. First question first. About Vishwarupam 2 facing the same problems, I think all parties involved in the first controversy are wiser now. And they won't be able to or willing to repeat that again. That's my hope. If they do, we'll take them on in the best logical manner.
We also hope the same.
I beg your pardon, I didn't hear that. Thank you. And about Mardanayagam, yes, a friend of mine wants to restart it, and I hope it does. It's a very important film for me. It talks about the first foundations of freedom struggle in India. That one.
Okay. Is it on now? Right. So I was curious about artists getting involved in protecting free speech. So I was involved in the fight to remove Section 66A in the Supreme Court. And there's been a case in the Supreme Court recently about decriminalization of defamation, which is very critical for artists like yourself, because criminal defamation is a case that gets filed very easily and quickly by people trying to curtail your free speech. But we don't really see artists speaking up when such important cases reach the Supreme Court. So what will it take for people like you to get more involved at that important a juncture?
There is this common fear that you cannot comment on something sub judice, and that's why we don't know really the thin line between legality and illegality that might be foisted on you by the honorable court.
There's also an option for you to join the case, in fact.
I beg your pardon?
There's an option for you to even join the case and fight along with those who file the case as well.
Yes, but we have to be careful. That's why we don't voice. We want to talk to a lawyer first before we talk. It could be misconstrued or even misused, sometimes even by a cleverer lawyer. So, vanakkam.
You are one of the brave men. I am living with you. I am very proud of it. For example, the Vishwarupam, the whole Tamil Nadu and everybody opposed it. The movie cleared censor. That's a legally okay movie. For example, I go to work, I get paid, then on the way somebody comes, hey, you are not worth that $60,000, you are not worth that $100,000. That's not fair. That's what happened to your movie. It's legally clear. So I oppose that. But that's tremendous stress. Even individually, I get stress. I don't know how to handle sometimes. I just want to know, how do you handle the stress with all those, each movie you get problems? Can you just give one point that I can use in my life too? Thank you. Nandri.
I think you can be stress-free if you're very confident that you're right. When you vacillate, when you're in doubt, that's stress. You can be even ignorant about the fact that you're right. But once you know it, that's a relief. I usually, when I'm stressed, I sleep without medication. It helps. Thank you, sir.
There's a gentleman up there waiting, up there.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
My question is about distributors and cinema owners in India. So there exists a risk of film distributors and cinema owners forming a cartel and restricting the delivery of media or its reach. How do you think this should be addressed, and why are states continually failing?
Directly. I think because you see, in a world of open source, protectionism cannot work like medieval times. You can't stand on your ramparts and say no further. Who goes there, friend or foe? It's not how business is going to work. You'll have to use every opportunity. It's so subcutaneous now, you don't even see money passing hands now. But there's so much profit in it. They don't realize all that. They're protecting vested interests in archaic machines and tools without accepting the fact that they will be outdated very soon, especially in this era. Quickly outdated. And they want to save that money and hence form a cartel. But that's all impeding the ascent of the business, the rise of the business. That's sad. But you can't have a private tutorial for these guys and tell them, I try, but I'm not a good teacher.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sunil Manjula. I'm a neurosurgeon by profession. I work here in Boston. I'm a huge fan of yours. Couple questions for you. I've seen your recent movie Uttama Villan, and people think that we all think that you're an amazing actor, but you've spoken about being a method actor versus not. So what is meant by method actor? Is it that somebody who really takes a lot of time to prepare for the role, or?
As a neurosurgeon, you'll understand there is a method to every madness. So my method is mine. It's like a fingerprint. I know I do things certain way. Like my mother, when she used to cook, she didn't like me sitting on the right side. I asked her why. No, it cramps my style. That's a method. Somehow she thought that doing this with the right is the best way. Why not the left? There's another way. I would do it with the left. But method is something which I have found a method which is comfortable for me, not necessarily Stanislavski's.
How far are we from winning a lot of Oscar awards in foreign film categories? We make such amazing movies, and why we are not able to really showcase us better there?
I'm glad that this question is asked of me in America, because we are as far away from the Oscars as we are from acting in American films. The Oscars is it's an American standard for quality. It's not an Indian standard. So when we act, when we compete on a level playground, that's when we should aspire for Oscars. Oscars is a fantastic standard, but it cannot be the world standard.
Thank you.
There's a line over there, the back just there.
Namaste, Kamalji. Apart from being a phenomenal actor, director, filmmaker, poet, writer, you also are a classically trained dancer. Would you consider to give a classical dance performance anytime soon? We would like to invite you here.
Well, it's like getting back into a karate tournament. It's as difficult because you'll have to be in training. I'm out of training, and I was almost afraid you might ask me to do it now. I was going to use my shoes as an excuse. But yes, why not? I would love to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
The mic.
My name is Dr. Arvind Lal. I've come from India like you. I'm a speaker tomorrow, and we are also one of the sponsors of this conference. My question to you is that you clearly made out a very big case that acting can be taught. Correct? Now, if acting can be taught, why is it that in India we give acting for cinema or the teaching of acting for cinema? We don't seem to take it seriously. Look at the FTII. I'm a product of Armed Forces Medical College, Pune. We used to have a very nice kind of a relationship with FTII, and suddenly we heard that the acting course has been stopped. Nasiruddin Shah, Anupam Kher, Irfan, all these people are, And then we heard about Roshan Taneja's school, then we heard about, another school, etc. So why is it that we don't take, teaching of acting seriously in India?
I wish someone had done that about 40, 50 years back. Fortunately, I had mentors who were not actually keen on teaching, they were keen on making their film better. I benefited out of it. All my gurus paid me to learn. That's very rare, very, very rare indeed. But acting is, like comedy, is very serious business. It can be taught, and I don't think actors are born, nor are villains. They are made to be that.
Why do we fiddle to it?
We don't. We make it into a broad spectrum because they say that, see, there's this total belief that those who've done literature, MA, are ready for screenplay writing. I think not. Because you think you can ride a horse, it doesn't mean you can ride a motorcycle. That's a different balance. It's fantastic. A motorcyclist may not last more than 4 seconds on a horse, but still this needs training. So likewise, acting for films is not to be mistaken with Bharatanatyam and stage acting. It's 2, 3 different variety, techniques of performing. All that can be taught and usefully taught. That as a director I could benefit tomorrow with trained actors who come in. I'll make more money because they'll spend less time bumbling about the set.
I'm Nima Srinivasan. I'm moderating the marketing panel tomorrow. I know that a lot of your fans will agree with me when I say that your movies like Magalir Mattum from 9 to 5 or Abhayashan Boogie, again from Mrs. Doubtfire, all of these, you really captured the essence of who we are, our stories, our culture, and made it something identifiable. Is there any chance at all you'll consider that with People versus Larry Flint? People versus Larry Flint, bringing it back to the freedom of expression? Because that movie did that for Hollywood.
Oh, yeah.
So you'll do that for us?
Well, let them first let me release Vishwarupam too.
So if we can go around back.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, hi. My name is Swati, and I'm representing Smith College.
Yay!
I would just like to ask, so in the past you said that you are not interested in joining politics even though you use your films to express a lot of your political ideas. Under what circumstances would you move from just expressing them through your films and actually going into politics? And what would you say to a younger you earlier in your career who is on the cusp of deciding whether or not to go into politics or to stay in film and the arts?
See, there was a time when all of India was in politics, was involved in politics. That was during, I think, most of India at least, during the Quit India movement. Everybody was a politician. Everybody was at it. It might happen again, but I only hope this time that there are no guns involved. Because when I come into politics, active politics, I might carry one. I don't want to. But that's why I don't come into politics. I'm better off expressing vociferously from the place I am. We don't need dictators. It's a great country. We don't need soldiers. We don't need a war. We won it in a unique way, our freedom, and we'll keep it in a unique way without everybody jumping into the fray. I think in future we'll have CEOs running the country, not leaders. Because I think we are not sheep anymore. We don't need to be shepherded. We need someone to take care of us, take care of our job, which we are not able to perform because we have other things to do. So we appoint somebody who takes it up like a company CEO and takes responsibility for success and failure. That's utopia again, but then why not? We can aspire for that. And you should all be involved, as I was saying, be awake, aware, and not be shepherded.
Yes. Gentlemen.
Thank you.
Right. Hello, sir. Good evening. Since this topic is about freedom of speech and the contentious issue is responsibility versus absolutism of freedom of speech per se, one of the audience members and the panelists for tomorrow, Dr. Shashi Tharoor and the late Christopher Hitchens, had an intense discussion about what it means to be an absolutist in freedom of speech and talk with responsibility. So when it's in the beginning, we talked about responsibility of freedom of speech. So where does this responsibility of freedom of speech end? Does this end at not being willfully offensive when you talk about it, or does this end at...
No, not being willfully offensive is a personal choice. It could be any way, and my choice is that. I have chosen to be that, but it could be any way. I mean, Malcolm X is one kind of way. I mean, Lenny Bruce is another kind of performer, and in a public arena, I mean, I think even expletives are the right of an artist. And that's what we are trying to recommend to the certification board. I mean, truly I believe expletives is a manner of expression. It should not be curbed in cinema, because you're able to define a character within moment, the way he speaks, where he comes from, and you can really pin him down to character. And that's when expletives and gentle speak is juxtaposed and clearly shown to the audience. Saves time.
If I have just a small follow-up to that. I mean, the current state of affairs, I mean, even though you're not being willfully offensive, and this right to criticize anything and everything under the sun is, I guess, the inalienable right of freedom of speech. So in your opinion, isn't this not being curtailed to some extent in India? I mean, not on any other side.
Absolutely, it is. It is. And I think it shouldn't. I believe I won't offend, but if another person offends, there is a particular way of defending it gracefully.
Rather than
even in martial arts, there's Aikido and then there is Karate. If you know Aikido, you use your opponent's force and he's lying down before he knows.
So it's more verbal than physical force. That's what, it's more verbal rebuttal than physical force is what you're doing.
It's not about rebuttal, it's about getting him to understand what he's angry about. Just tell him that there's this lovely movie called Rebel Without a Cause. And somebody, he has this blazer which says rebel on his back. And somebody in the bar asks, "Oh, you're a rebel. What are you rebel against?" And Brando says, "What you got?" And so, what do you do with a guy like that?
Why don't we move on? Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, sir. My name is Sneha, and I'm a huge fan of yours, and my whole family is a fan of yours, so this is a dream come true. I had a light-hearted question. I know you've been acting since you were very young, and what advice would you give for people who are in early stage of their careers? They can do anything, and how to enjoy their work. I mean, you've been around 50 years you've been acting, so what in acting excites you every day to come to work?
Acting and toilet training came together for me. So it's almost that time when I started learning to act. And that's a lovely question you asked about how to enjoy. I don't know whether I'll be able to teach you that, but I did. I didn't even know I was a child labor. I was happy doing it. And that's one good way of enjoying it. And I've never worked in the last 25 years. It's a continuous holiday. And people pay me for it. And
Thank you. That's really inspiring. Thank you.
thank you.
Right here.
Hello. Hi. Before I begin my question, I have to say this to you. 26 வருஷமா மெட்ராஸ்லேருந்து உங்களை துரத்தி கடைசியில் I found you in Boston.
Would you care to translate for those who might not understand?
பேசவே தெரியல. But when you're talking about freedom of expression, one of the greatest sites of freedom of expression was drama, stage play. I remember Rajapat Tangadurai. Today, what happened to it? Why is drama suddenly a preserve of the elite? It's so expensive, it's so inaccessible to the common man.
No, I think we have been irresponsible. You have been irresponsible. I have been irresponsible. We have a duty to preserve, to love and keep it. We just neglected it. We just threw it around like plastic bottles and walked away. We did not preserve it. We got television, so we relinquished theater. That's our mistake, our bad. And it can be rectified, and we are trying to address it. We had a great tradition, but we are losing it. We're making it boring. The classical arts are boring now because we're doing nothing about grabbing the audience, because it's infra dig now to grab the attention of the audience. I don't think that's the virtue of any classical or any art for that matter.
So, many of the people in the audience are students from the Kennedy School, the business school, other schools obviously from elsewhere. They're going to be working on a wide range of issues. I met somebody today who's working on housing, somebody who's a lawyer. So as they go back to their careers, as well as the distinguished panelists who are here, what are 3 things that people could do as they think about their role, individual role? Sometimes it's very hard as an individual, particularly if we don't have a status like you do. I mean, I knew when I came out and there was a security guard, I was like, okay, my classes have never been that popular that I have a security guard. Nobody's chasing down policy and analysts. So, we are just regular people. What is it that we can do when we, in our individual roles, to work on issues of freedom of speech, of democratic participation, of what you called unity and diversity, the kinds of values the country was founded on, but now through religion and politics and other forces are being frayed?
First, ruling by violence is something that should be made unfashionable, not in style, tacky. So somebody should reiterate the point over and over and over again, since it becomes nasty. It's bad public behavior to rule by force. And war is not the best way to settle debates, any debate. And most of the world understands it now, but then the avarice of those who seek wealth and power are such that it easily overlooks these great virtues. Knowing fully well their virtues, they say that we can't afford it. I always say that, like they say, be honest. Honesty may not be a great policy, but it's a great luxury. Very few people can afford it. I'm trying to afford it. So that's what we should all do. We cannot think that it's Mr. Shashi Tharoor's responsibility. He's a politician, he'll take care of it. That's not my business. It's my business also. Like he cannot think bad acting is not his business. He must shout down bad acting, bad movies, and say I paid too much. Don't do movies like this. We don't. We think criticism is one-upmanship. It is not. Tomorrow, what ails the society can be described by what kind of art they enjoy. So these are the duties that all of us have. And my closing request and an idea that I'd like to plant in your mind is, film industry is a fantastic business. I think moving images is a fantastic business. Let me not call it film anymore. The platforms are changing. The business is expanding. All platforms are merging. So it's going to be something else. And some of you can bring and must bring your expertise back home. We are one of the biggest filmmaking country, or probably one of the two biggest filmmaking countries in the world, and we need support. Welcome.